When Harman Phoenix was first announced, I was really excited. It's not often you see a brand new color emulsion hit the market. But I'm not gonna lie to you, as someone who prefers to shoot medium format, I was a little disappointed to see it available only in 35mm. But if you're like me and you really want to know what this looks like in medium format, I got something to show you. I took this roll, cut it in half, rolled it up in some backing paper, and jammed it into a camera, and this is what I ended up with. Turns out cameras don't like it when you just haphazardly mash some film into it. While I was able to shoot this in a medium format camera, this ended up not being practical by any means, and it might come as a surprise, but part of the film got mangled inside the camera. Looks interesting, but a real pain to shoot and scan, which sucks because I really want to shoot this stuff in medium format. On a completely unrelated note, Harman sent me this package. Let's see what's inside. Well, isn't that convenient? Due to popular demand, this stuff is now available in 120, and Harman was kind enough to send me a few rolls to test out. So enough talk, what does this film look like? It's still Phoenix. It still has all of its hallmark traits like the purple base that heavily influences the scans. For example, this is what an uncorrected scan from an Epson V850 looks like. And with a simple correction you could tone down that Wild West filter, but with this film in particular, depending on how you scan, your results will vary. It's still contrasty and warm, it's the same Phoenix. The big difference being it's in a bigger format. One of the main complaints I've seen regarding the 35mm version is the grain being so aggressive. But one of the benefits of shooting a larger format is the grain is now perceived to be relatively smaller than the 35mm counterpart. So if you thought Phoenix was too grainy at 35, here's an easy fix. In the first video I made about Phoenix, I cross-processed it in E6 and bracketed my shots between EI 50 and 200. Turns out 200 is underexposed and 50 is overexposed, and pretty much no latitude to fix in post, which led me to believe that maybe 100 was a sweet spot. It might look a little dense on camera, but it does scan a lot better than my previous attempt. The highlights aren't completely blown out and the shadows aren't completely crushed, so it does retain a little more information, and I think it turned out looking pretty good. Pretty good as long as you ignore the bluish green cast, the high contrast, the lack of latitude, the effective loss of one stop by cross-processing, and the additional cost of E6 development. But yeah, if you ignore that stuff, it turned out looking pretty good. I also tried this one shot with a yellow filter just to see if it could help tame down some of the blue. The good news is the blues won't be an issue anymore, because there are none, but now you have this yellow-green problem. And for kicks, I decided to color correct this one too, and it ended up being really washed out, kind of like bleach bypass. Speaking of which, when I previously bleach bypassed this stuff, it didn't turn out that well. It was overexposed and not good. I decided to underexpose the next roll and I shot it at EI 400. Yeah, I don't really know what happened here, but the biggest thing is the color of the base. Every time I've bleach bypassed color film, it tends to look like this, with a really dense and cooked base. Whereas this came out looking suspiciously normal. My first thought was somehow the bleach bypassing didn't take. I'm pretty sure it did. Here's an example. This frame was scanned without digital ice, and this one with digital ice. And you can see this weird drop shadow effect. That's the infrared dust removal being confused by the silver left on the film. So that alone tells me that it was bleach bypassed, at least to some capacity. I can't quite pinpoint what happened here, but I'm pretty sure it's some developing thing on my end. In my last video, I briefly touched on possibly doing some infrared trichromes. These are triple exposure trichromes. They were made using an R72 infrared filter, a 58 green filter, and a 47B blue filter. I didn't know how much I needed to compensate for the infrared channel. I could have done the smart thing and bracketed a bunch of shots to see what the best exposure would be, but I didn't do that. I just winged it. These shots range between 4 stops to 12 stops overexposed, not accounting for the R72 filter. This one was 12 stops overexposed, and yeah, it's a little too much. couple of these shots seem to have the complete lack of anything captured in the red channel, which is surprising. A couple of them did capture something and was able to create some kind of infrared trichrome shots, but it's pretty underwhelming nonetheless. So to answer the question, could you capture color infrared with this film? Not really. While we're on this trichrome kick, I decided to do the old classic trichrome and develop it in black and white. This came out very thin. Looking at the rebate, it looks underdeveloped. I've usually had good luck cross-processing C41 in black and white, but not this time. In this one I tried infrared again, but as you can see, this is where the R72 filter captured nothing. Even after accounting for the filter and overexposing another 5 stops, I think it pretty much confirms that you're not really getting a whole lot. In a quick detour, these shots weren't trichromed, I just wanted to see what this film looked like as a black and white film. Next, I decided to push it 3 stops. While the base got absolutely cooked, the negatives are still a little thin. I'm not sure if a longer development time would have helped or if the film was just hitting its limit. The results are alright. You get color shifts and the shadows are the first thing to go. Is it worth trying? Probably not, but if you have to push it 3 stops, you could get something out of it. On another note, Newton's third law states that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, meaning in order to comply with the laws of physics, if I push 3 stops, that means I'd have to pull 3 stops too, right? Well, I'm not going to break any laws here, so I did pull it 3 stops. But before I show you the negatives, let me preemptively explain myself. I've never really pulled color film before, but going into it I didn't really think it was going to be that big of a deal. But then I started looking around for development times and I realized there wasn't a whole lot out there regarding a 3-stop pull. I used Cinestill CS41 kit, and their instructions only had times for a 1-stop pull. The smart thing to do would be work my way up 1 stop at a time, but instead, like an idiot, I just started at 3 stops. So whenever I find myself without any formal instructions, I always fall back on this old technique I learned a long time ago. I think the scientific term is YOLO. So I decided to develop the film for 2 minutes at 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Why did I pick 2 minutes at 100 degrees? I don't know, I just thought it felt right. So how'd it turn out? Surprisingly well. I developed this right after I developed the push roll, so my expectations were very low. So to get negatives that look like this, huge relief. Compared to the normally developed roll, this one has a lighter base, so maybe development times have something to do with the base color. There's also some weird development marks. I'm guessing this just happens because the development time was so short, but overall, not bad. To wrap this all up, if you want a traditional natural looking color film, this ain't it. This is still very much an experimental emulsion. So it might not be the film you want today, but the goal is to one day make a color film or color films that can compete with the big dogs, or what's more likely in the future, the one big dog and the one weird small German dog that just ain't right, but you can't quite put your finger on what's wrong with it. Anyway, that's all to say Harman doesn't plan on stopping here. This is just step 1. If this is a mission or a project that you could get behind, I'd suggest picking up a roll or two, either in 35mm or now 120 to show your support. Inside every box of Phoenix there's a QR code that sends you to a feedback page. And here you can submit your thoughts and suggestions. As an example, there were a lot of requests for Phoenix of 120 and 120mm, which, you know, it's an understandable mistake to make. It's just 120, not 120mm roll film, which would be really dumb. Unless... Hey Harman, have you ever considered that maybe a bunch of people actually want to bring back the old dead 104 format? Just a thought.